Understanding the history of English studies helps explain how it became an academic subject. Until the 1820s, higher education in England was controlled by the Church of England, with Oxford and Cambridge as the only universities. These universities taught classics, math, and religion, excluded non Anglicans and women, and were run like religious institutions. Reform began in 1826 with London University, later University College London, which allowed students of all religions and introduced English as a subject. However, early English studies focused on language, using literature only for examples. English literature as a separate subject started at King's College London in 1831. Women's education slowly progressed. Women's colleges like Girton and Newnham were founded, but women could not earn full degrees at Oxford or Cambridge until the 20th century. London University was more progressive, granting degrees to women from 1879. The United States was ahead, with colleges for women and black graduates emerging earlier. In England, F.D. Morris, a professor at King's College in 1840, promoted English literature as a tool to unite society. He believed it could replace religion in teaching morals and national pride, especially for the middle class, preventing rebellion by making people feel connected to England despite social inequalities. This idea linked English studies to maintaining political stability. Debates about English as a valid academic subject centered on whether it had real knowledge. Critics like historian Edward Freeman argued literature could not be examined like technical subjects. In 1887, Freeman opposed creating an English program at Oxford, claiming studying literature without language was just chatter about Shelley. His view won, leading Oxford's 1894 English program to include language history, Old English, Middle English, etc., a structure still partly in place today. In the United States, English evolved differently. Early colleges focused on Latin and Greek taught through translation drills. By the late 1800s, German inspired philology, studying language, structure, and history, dominated, making literature dry and technical. Some professors taught rhetoric, using famous passages to train public speaking and writing, useful for professions like law or politics. However, this approach faded as critics found it shallow. By the 1920s, new critics pushed studying literature as literature, focusing on text rather than history or language. Patriotism after World War I also boosted American literature studies. In 1920s Cambridge, English studies shifted decisively. I.A. Richards introduced practical criticism, analyzing text closely without historical context. Student William Empson took this further in Seven Types of Ambiguity, published in 1930, dissecting poetic language intricately. F.R. Lewis and his wife Q.D. Lewis emphasized literature's moral role, judging works based on their human value. Their journal Scrutiny promoted rigorous analysis but often blurred personal judgment with objective criticism. Lewis avoided defining his methods, leaving literary studies isolated from history, philosophy, and linguistics. By the 1960s, theory emerged to reconnect literature with these fields, challenging earlier narrow approaches. The history of English studies shows it was shaped by social changes, educational reforms, and debates over its purpose, whether to control society, teach morals, or analyze texts. While early motives mixed class guilt, missionary zeal, and fear of rebellion, the subject gradually professionalized, though tensions between technical analysis and broader interpretation remain. Traditional English studies, shaped by liberal humanism, revolves around key beliefs absorbed through studying literature. Here are 10 simplified breakdown of these ideas. First, timeless literature. Great works transcend their era, addressing universal human truths. Like Shakespeare, they remain relevant across ages, offering insights into enduring emotions and experiences. Second, text centered meaning. A book's meaning lies within itself, not in external context like history, politics, or the author's life. Critics focus on close reading, analyzing the text alone, free from outside influences, to uncover its essence. Third, unchanging human nature. Literature's value lies in reflecting consistent human traits like love, ambition, etc., not innovation. Older works resonate because they mirror timeless feelings even if styles evolve. Fourth, fixed individuality. People have a core self that stays intact. Characters who undergo drastic transformations, like Dickens' sudden moral shifts, feel unrealistic as they clash with the belief in a stable identity. Fifth, self over society. Individuals are not products of their environment. Literature often portrays characters as independent of societal pressures, emphasizing personal essence over external influences. Sixth, moral without preaching. Literature should promote empathy and ethics subtly. Overly political or didactic works are distrusted, like Keats's warning against art with a palpable design to manipulate. Seventh, form follows content. Literary elements like imagery and structure must blend naturally with the story. Decorative language feels fake. True artistry merges style and substance seamlessly. Eighth, sincerity in writing. Honesty shines through language, avoiding cliches, using fresh descriptions and understand emotion signal authenticity. Great writing enacts its themes, making words feel alive. Ninth, show don't tell. Ideas matter less than vivid sensory storytelling. Abstract concepts are weak unless embodied in concrete scenes. Critics like Lewis valued literature that demonstrates rather than explains. 10th, criticism without theory. Analyzing texts requires no grand theories. Trusting direct experience inspired by philosopher Locke, critics avoid preconceived ideas, letting the word speak for itself. These tenets from liberal humanism, emphasizing literature's power to reveal universal truths through careful, context free analysis. While valuing moral depth, it distrusts overt politics, theoretical frameworks, or radical change, prioritizing stability, individual essence, and the timeless resonance of well crafted words. The history of literary theory stretches far before the modern theory movement of the 1960s and 1970s. Even though earlier critics rarely spelled out their ideas explicitly, they built a foundation for understanding literature. This journey begins with ancient thinkers like Aristotle, whose Poetics defined tragedy as exploring human character through action, aiming to evoke pity and fear in audiences for emotional catharsis. Philip Sidney in the 16th century argued literature's purpose was to teach by delighting, blending moral lessons with pleasure, a radical idea in a religious era wary of fiction. In the 18th century, Samuel Johnson combined theory with practical criticism, analyzing authors like Shakespeare in depth, breaking from the tradition of only treating religious texts as sacred. The Romantic poets then sparked debates about language and creativity. Wordsworth, in his preface to lyrical ballads, rejected ornate poetic language, insisting on simple prose like speech to connect with everyday readers. Coleridge disagreed, valuing poetry's unique imaginative language. Shelley, meanwhile, saw poetry as defamiliarizing the world, making the familiar feel new, an idea later echoed by Russian theorists. Keats highlighted the unconscious mind's role in creativity, calling it negative capability, embracing uncertainty without forcing logic. By the 19th century, two approaches emerged: practical criticism, which is a close reading of texts, and theoretical exploration that posed big questions about literature's purpose. Matthew Arnold, a key figure, saw literature as a substitute for religion, uniting society through shared cultural values. He promoted disinterested criticism, judging works purely on merit, free from politics. His touchstone method encouraged comparing new works to classics like Dante or Shakespeare to gauge quality. In the 20th century, T.S. Eliot and F.R. Lewis dominated. Eliot introduced ideas like the objective correlative, which showing emotions through objects, actions, not direct description, and impersonality, separating the poet's life from the work. Lewis, influenced by art, stressed literature's moral role, judging texts by their life-enhancing power. He challenged established authors, urging readers to question reputations through close analysis. Meanwhile, I.A. Richards and William Empson pioneered practical criticism, studying texts in isolation without context, a method that dominated classrooms for decades. However, tensions simmered. Critics like Rene Willock argued that close reading was not enough. Theories needed explicit explanation. This clash between tradition and theory erupted in the 1970s, but its roots ran deep. For instance, Lewis dismissed philosophy while theorists demand scrutiny of assumptions. A liberal humanist reading of Edgar Allan Poe's short story, The Oval Portrait, might focus on its moral message. For example, it could argue that the tale warns against valuing art over real life. The artist in the story becomes obsessed with painting his wife's portrait, draining her life to create a masterpiece. A critic influenced by thinkers like F.R. Lewis might see this as a caution against selfish ambition. Art should serve life, not destroy it. The story becomes a lesson about arrogance, hubris, and the dangers of treating art as a godlike pursuit detached from human connection. This approach highlights the conflict between creativity and morality that pays little attention to the story's structure, symbols, or genre. By the 1960s, new critical theories began challenging this moral focused style. Earlier, movements like Marxist criticism, focusing on class struggles, and psychoanalytic criticism, exploring unconscious desires, resurfaced. At the same time, linguistic criticism, studying language patterns, and early feminist criticism, analyzing gender roles, emerged, questioning traditional interpretations. In the 1970s, structuralism, studying underlying patterns in stories, and post-structuralism, arguing language is unstable, arrived from France. These ideas caused a crisis in English studies by shifting focus to how texts work, not their moral essence. By the 1980s, critics turned back to history and politics. New historicism and cultural materialism blended literature with social context, showing how power and culture shape texts. In the 1990s, criticism fragmented in specialized areas. Post-colonialism, highlighting the voices of formerly colonized nations. Postmodernism, emphasizing fragmented, chaotic modern life. Gender studies, expanding feminism to include LGBTQ perspectives. Womanism, focusing on marginalized women, especially black feminists. These movements rejected one-size-fits-all theories like Marxism, instead valuing diverse experiences. The shift from broad moral lessons, like in the Oval Portrait, to analyzing power, language, and identity reflects how literary theory evolved from universal truths to celebrating difference. Critical theory has 5 main ideas that shape how it views literature and the world. First, nothing is fixed. Ideas we take for granted, like gender identity or even what counts as literature, are not natural or permanent. They are shaped by society, politics, and changing perspectives. For example, what is considered normal today might be seen differently in another time or culture. Truth is not absolute, it is temporary and depends on context. Theories that claim things have fixed universal meanings called essentialism are rejected. Second, everyone has biases. No one can be completely neutral. Our beliefs, politics, and backgrounds influence how we think and interpret things. Even claiming to be neutral is a bias in disguise. For example, a critic who says they are just analyzing the text itself is still using a specific method shaped by their own views. This makes all knowledge provisional. There is no perfect, unbiased truth. Third, language shapes reality. Words do not just describe the world, they create it. How we talk about things like success or family defines how we experience them. For instance, calling someone brave versus reckless changes how we see their actions. Meaning is not locked in a text, it is built by readers interacting with the words. It depends as much on the reader as the writer. Fourth, meanings are never final. Texts like poems, novels, or even laws do not have one correct meaning. They are full of contradictions and can be interpreted in endless ways. For example, Romeo and Juliet might be a love story to some and a critique of feudalism to others. Once a work is published, the author's intent does not control its meaning. Readers and cultures reinterpret it over time. Fifth, beware of universal claims. Big ideas like great literature or human nature often hide biases. For example, the Western canon of great books mostly reflects European male perspectives, ignoring other culture. Similarly, human nature is often defined in ways that exclude women, minorities, or non Western people. Critical theory questions these norms, asking who decides what's great, whose voices are missing. In short, politics is everywhere. Power dynamics shape what we value and study. Language builds reality. Words do not just describe, they create. Truth is temporary. Knowledge changes with time and context. Meaning is flexible. Texts have multiple interpretations. Human nature is a myth. There is no single normal way to be human. These ideas challenge traditional ways of studying literature, pushing us to ask why we the way we do and whose interests it serves.